Hey, I'm Todd Newton. Welcome to Dearborn, Michigan, just outside of Detroit, and welcome to the Henry Ford Museum of American Innovation. Now, just inside, we're going to essentially take a trip back in time and see some of the vehicles that shaped modern transportation, as well as some artifacts that shaped American history. I'm glad you're here for this one. This is the Tattooed Traveler. It's no secret that Detroit has taken more than its fair share of hits over the years. An economic downturn that began in the 70s, the bankruptcy of Chrysler and General Motors, leaving so many unemployed, a mass exodus from the city, far more people moving out than moving into Detroit, high crime rates, but just like that Journey song, and you know the one I'm talking about, city boy born and raised in South Detroit, they don't stop believing. A true testament to that fighting spirit is this. The locals call it the Fist, but this is the monument to Joe Louis, the legendary boxer, also known as the Brown Bomber, who was born right here in Detroit. And if any boxer deserves his own monument, it is Joe Louis. I mean, he was the world heavyweight champion from 1937 all the way to 1949. That's the longest reign in the history of any weight division. And he successfully defended his title 25 times. He didn't back down from anybody. 21 of those fights ended in knockouts. In this monument great, the Fist alone weighs 5,000 pounds. Many say Joe Louis was the best boxer ever. His overall career, 66 wins, only 3 losses. And much like the Brown Bomber, his hometown never stopped swinging either. Look at that architecture. And when it comes to sports, this town rivals any other in America. They love their Tigers here, their Pistons, their Red Wings, of course, their Detroit Lions. The theater and arts scene here in Detroit is incredible. But it's the museums, and one in particular, that bring us here today, or 8 miles west of Detroit, to the hometown, the birthplace of Henry Ford. This is Dearborn, Michigan. Ford was born here on the family farm in July of 1863. He was one of 8 children. Now, to call Henry Ford an innovator, an entrepreneur, an inventor, a business mogul, all would be understatements. His vision and work ethic, as we'll learn here touring the Henry Ford Museum, changed the world. He founded the Ford Motor Company in 1903. He was the chief developer of assembly line, mass production. And I learned just today when I was buying my ticket for admission that he was one of the pioneers of the 5-day work week. This place is huge. It's the largest indoor-outdoor museum complex in the country. Has to be, really. It holds artifacts from over 300 years of American history. The chair that Abraham Lincoln was assassinated in, you'll see it. The limousine that JFK was assassinated in. I'll show it to you. But I'd like to begin here at the Civil Rights exhibit. Look at that, a Ku Klux Klan outfit. We've done shows in Greensboro, North Carolina, at the site of the Greensboro sit-in, segregated drinking fountain. We've done a show in Memphis at the site of Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination. You can watch all of those here on the channel. We've even visited the Rosa Parks statue in Grand Rapids, Michigan. But this, wow, is the actual Rosa Parks bus where she made history. On a chilly December evening in 1955, Rosa Parks, who was an African-American woman, there she is, was arrested for not obeying an Alabama law that required black passengers to relinquish seats to white passengers on buses, this bus, when the bus was full. When that happened, the black passengers were required, again, by law, to go sit at the back of the bus. Well, on that evening, here on bus 2857, Rosa Parks was seated right here. And the bus driver, a gentleman by the name of James Blake, instructed her and 3 other black individuals to get out of their seats forfeit them to white passengers and go sit in the back. The 3 other African Americans obeyed the command. Rosa did not. As a result, Rosa, who was very active in the civil rights movement at the time, was arrested and convicted of violating the laws of segregation. More degrading than having to get up and move to the back of the bus so another person can sit down just based on the color of skin, I think, is the fact that black passengers had to enter through the front of the bus, deposit their coins, their bus fare, get back off, and then re-enter through this rear entryway. When the city of Montgomery decommissioned bus number 2857, a private citizen acquired it and used it as a storage shed on his farm. The conditions really took its toll, and it became just a big old rusted pile of junk, essentially. The Henry Ford Museum acquired it in 2001 and restored it to the condition you see today. This photo is a pretty common one in the history books, but it's a little confusing. You'll notice Rosa Parks, who was 42 at the time of her arrest, is sitting on the opposite side of the bus from where we now know she sat, and in front of a white man. Well, that bus was not 2857, and that photo was taken after the civil rights hearings and after the laws had been changed. Switching gears now to a different kind of history. Remember these? Well, if you've ever spent any time at all in New York City, you certainly do. I know today it's all about Uber and Lyft, but boy, those yellow checkered cabs. They're all yellow, by the way, because studies show it's the most recognizable color. And this, the Oscar Mayer Wiener Mobile. Remember the song? Oh, I wish I were an Oscar Mayer Wiener. Da, 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 da. The original was created in 1936 by Oscar Mayer's nephew, Carl. This is the 1952 model that's on display here at the Henry Ford Museum. The company would use the Wienermobile to go out to parades and schools and carnivals to promote their hot dogs. And in 2004, they announced a contest where customers could win the right to use the Wienermobile for a full day. Where was I for that one? Our next stop is going to be the chair that Abraham Lincoln was assassinated in. But on the way, I want you to see this. One of only 200 exact copies, engravements of the Declaration of Independence, commissioned by Secretary of State John Quincy Adams in 1820. 2 copies each were given to the surviving signers, and the rest distributed to Congress and various universities. This is George Washington's camp bed. Speaking of our founding fathers, that is where our nation's father slept during the Revolutionary War. And this, the Lincoln chair. President Abraham Lincoln was sitting in this exact rocking chair during the production of a play called Our American Cousin at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C., when he was assassinated. That date was April 14th, 1865. As the story goes, Lincoln didn't even really want to go to the play that night. His wife wasn't feeling well. Sadly, there was no Secret Service at the time, and Lincoln's bodyguard, a fellow named John Parker, was at a saloon next door to the theater having a drink. Lincoln's assassin, John Wilkes Booth, leapt from the balcony after shooting the president, broke his leg during the fall, was on the run for 12 days before being captured at a farm in Virginia. Still to come, we're going to get up close with the presidential limousine collection here at the Henry Ford Museum, including the JFK limo. But look at this. How fun is that VW bus camper? Man, I could get lost in that thing. You wouldn't hear from me for months. And this 1949, is it 49? Yeah, 49 Airstream. I've always loved these things. That's my dream retirement right there. They start today at about $115,000. All right, let's talk the history of the Model T and the assembly line that made Ford a household name. The assembly line worked because of its efficiency and its precision. The vehicle was pulled down the line and put together step by step, and this allowed for the work to be taken to the workers without them having to move around and be taken to the various parts of the vehicle. You can see them all there. It's almost like putting together a really big puzzle. Ford installed the first moving assembly line on December 1st of 1913, and when he did, that innovation reduced the time it took to build one of these cars, like the Model T there, from more than 12 hours to just 1 hour and 33 minutes. By saving that kind of time, the Ford Motor Company was also saving a lot of money, and Henry Ford passed that savings on to the consumer. In 1909, this Model T cost $850, but by 1924, the price had gone down to only $260. To put that in perspective, in today's terms, that would equate to about $24,000, $25,000. So by utilizing the assembly line method of mass production, Henry Ford was making driving, especially driving nice vehicles like this, available and affordable for the middle class. It wasn't just for the rich anymore. And Ford was really pumping them out. They went from producing about 10,000 units a year in 1908 to producing 2 million units a year by 1924. Profits, my friend, big profits. In the early years, the Model T was started by a hand crank and could get up to about 45 miles per hour, 20 horsepower. It was 1919 when the cars started to be equipped with battery-powered starters. One of the tour guides here, a wonderful gentleman by the name of Jerry, told me that the Model Ts would get about anywhere from 13 to 21 miles per gallon of gasoline. And you'll notice that for the most part, the Model Ts are black. That's because black was the cheapest color. And when you just used one color, the assembly line didn't have to be shut down for a change of paint. Around 1926, some of the models were then offered in green here, maroon, some gray, but always with that black bumper. Ford paid his employees $2.34 a day, but the job was boring, and for a lot of people, it just wasn't worth it, so they would quit. And when he got frustrated with the high turnover rate, he doubled their pay to $5 a day, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. And when he did that, that turnover problem went away. They loved coming to work then. But as you will now see, folks like you and me aren't the only ones that enjoy driving a Ford now and then. The presidents of the United States, they loved their cars from the Ford Motor Company. This is the 1972 Lincoln Continental presidential limousine that was used by President Ronald Reagan. Yeah, this one was a favorite. It was also used by Presidents Nixon, Ford, Carter, and George H.W. Bush, but the history with this one runs pretty deep. This was the car that President Reagan was getting into when he was shot by John Hinckley on March 30th of 1981. This car carried Reagan to the hospital. This rear door here is the one that was open when he was shot, and Secret Service jumped on top of him, threw him into the back seat. It's a big car, 21 and a half feet long. Also on display is Bubble Top, the 1950 Lincoln presidential limo, which was originally commissioned by President Truman in 1950, but it's most associated with Dwight D. Eisenhower. He used the car from 1952 until 1960. This one's even a little bit longer than Reagan's. Most presidents felt it was important that their constituents be able to see them. Thus the Bubble Top. Lyndon Johnson also used Bubble Top, as did JFK, which brings us to the final stop on our tour, the Kennedy car, the one you've been hearing about, the one you've been waiting for. This is the vehicle that President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in on that fateful day in Dallas, Texas. It was November 22nd, 1963, a little before my time, but ask anyone that was around and they'll be able to tell you exactly where they were and what they were doing when they heard the news that Kennedy had been shot. You see those retractable steps there, those were for the Secret Service agents. This is a 1961 Lincoln Continental, but the Secret Service gave it the code name X100. It has a hydraulic rear seat that could be raised 10.5 inches to elevate the president so people could see him better. I found it interesting that the car was always the property of the Ford Motor Company. They leased it to the Secret Service for $500 a year until X100 was retired from service in early 1977. I really enjoy excursions where you pick up so much valuable information without feeling like you're being beaten over the head with it. Well done, Mr. Ford. Well done. That's exactly what you get here at the Henry Ford Museum in beautiful Dearborn, Michigan. Man, it's a great day. Hey, thanks for spending this time with me. And remember, if you've missed any previous episodes, head over to our YouTube channel at The Tattooed Traveler. Subscribe, and you can journey all over this big, beautiful world of ours to your heart's content. And you can order your brand new Tattooed Traveler merchandise, t-shirts, hoodies. We've got it all. Until we meet again a little further down the road, I'm Todd Newton. That fella there is Henry Ford. Travel safely.